Welcome to Inside the Mavs right here on Kevin Gray Sports. Appreciate you joining me right here on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. I'm your host, Kevin Gray. And joining me on this episode of Inside the Mavs, you know him from Locked On Mavericks, I would say the better half of the co-hosting duo.
Oh, wow.
Yes, shots fired already at Isaac Harris right here. Nick Angstadt joining me right here on Inside the Mavs. You can find him on Twitter, of course, at Nick Van Exit. Nick, what's going on, man? Good to see you. How are you?
I'm at least the half that you see it. You have to see it games more often because Isaac likes to sit way up high, and we like to sit in our little area over there. So
yeah.
Appreciate it. I'm doing well. I'm holding my breath, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm holding my breath like everyone else is.
Exactly, just like the rest of Mavericks fans are right now. I joke with Isaac. I love Isaac. That's my guy, man. I know he's doing well these days. So hopefully he doesn't see this and send me a bad message like, "Hey, what are you talking about?" On your show.
I'm texting him this as soon as it comes out.
Like, hey, did you hear what Kevin said about you and your co-host there? But yeah, we're getting ready for the playoffs. Obviously, the Mavericks are preparing to take on the Utah Jazz. They finished the Mavericks due as the 4th seed in the Western Conference, 52-30. A remarkable turnaround for a team that was 16-18. They finished their final 48 games, 36-12 over that span. And a lot has happened since the beginning of the year. Of course, no unicorn to be found because he's in Washington now, but you bring in Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. Before we actually jump into the actual series itself, and obviously what's going on with Luka Doncic and his calf injury, just your overall thoughts, and not just this season, but specifically the second half and the turnaround that they had to see them go from 16-18 to the 4th seed overall in the Western Conference to end the season.
Yeah, we talk a lot about like, a new coach, got to learn new schemes, got to figure out, the coaches got to figure out players got to figure out coach. And I feel like we saw that in real time this year, where we saw a coaching staff, a brand new coaching staff. It's Shamgod and then who
and Daryl Armstrong.
Daryl Armstrong, yeah, and that's it. And everybody else was different and new. And so you bring in this new coaching staff, bring in a couple new players, and they had to learn each other. Like, they had to figure out what's the best way for us to play, what's the best way for us to coach, what's the best style. And so they decided to go with this, and the Porzingis trade definitely helped them go in that direction, or it solidified that they were going in this direction of, we're going to play a little bit smaller, we're going to switch a ton on defense, and then we're going to play, obviously, through Luka on offense and a couple of ball handlers. And that, to me, is what really changed for this team. It's going to be a chicken and the egg thing, especially since it worked, because everybody's going to try to take credit for it. Nico's going to be like, oh, yeah, I knew we needed to play that way, so we traded Porzingis. And Kid's going to be like, I knew we were going to play that way, and so we just decided to change it before anything happened, and then we inspired the trade. But that was the big change. It's just the style of play. It was the style of defense, and taking this team from becoming a team that was in like the 20s, ranked in the 20s in defense over the last couple of years, to a team that was in the top 10 for a lot of this year was a huge step, and it really changed what this team is.
It's amazing to see, because all the conversation coming into the season was this will finally be an opportunity for Porzingis to have the kind of coach around him that will value him and get the most out of him. Turns out they were trying to get the most out of him to see if they could go ahead and move him on. And that's exactly what they wanted to do. Now, obviously, the injuries and those things continue to pile up for Porzingis, as unfortunately they did during his time in Dallas. But once they acquired Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans, specifically, with Spencer Dinwiddie, that thing became a godsend for them, just not for his playmaking abilities, his creation off the dribble, but he really kind of changed the way that this team played offense and reinforced, I think, as you were starting to allude to, the kind of style of basketball that they wanted to play, given what they have in Luka Doncic and needing to have more ball handlers around him, not just with Jalen Brunson, but a guy that could specifically create his own shot and could do so in clutch moments, as we've seen with Spencer Dinwiddie, during the second half of this year.
Well, we're seeing right now with Luka possibly out for a couple games in this series, or however long he's going to be out. Having another ball handler is huge, right? The Mavs need at least one more guy that can get their own shot. And time again, it was proven that Porzingis is just not that guy. He just is not going to be able to get his own shot in a way. He had to be set up. The ball had to be in the right spot. He had to be given the right minutes, the right rotation. Spencer Dinwiddie comes in and he's like, I don't know, man. Just play me somewhere next to Luka, next to Brunson by myself. I don't care. I'm just going to go to the basket and I'm going to, hit my threes when I do. And so, it is a godsend, like you said, to have Spencer Dinwiddie in this situation, especially with Luka possibly out for some time. I won't put a number of days on it. I just don't feel like that would help anybody. But
so let's go ahead and go there. Obviously, the biggest concern for this team is the health of 77 and his availability for Saturday afternoon, which, by the way, quick aside, what a horrible draw that devastated. They got. Oh, my gosh.
I got to share with you, hey, it's Saturday at noon, and you were like, what? You were so devastated it was Saturday.
For those who don't know, I'm a sports host on 105.3 The Fan, and I will actually be on air during Game 1 of the NBA playoffs for the Dallas Mavericks, since they play at high noon on Saturday. So I will not be in attendance for the game. I'll actually be on air as the game is going on. But
so simulcast the fan while you're watching the game. Be that guy that shows up at the baseball stadium with the transistor radio that's sitting there.
That's right, just in our ear. That's right, exactly. So they play at noon. Now, for people who don't know, the Dallas Stars, also have a game later on that night. They play at 7:00. So by the time the game ends, there's going to be about a 3-4 hour turnaround by the time they get the floor off of the American Airlines Center and then put the ice down. I don't know how that works or how that's going to look, but that
might be a better show than the actual game, right? Just to see how fast those people have to work and get that all down.
Yeah, to get the floor off and get the ice on for the Stars to play their game later on that night. But of course, the conversation coming out of the game on Sunday against the San Antonio Spurs was, should Luka Doncic have been playing at that juncture of the game when he did get hurt? Now, he got hurt with 2:24 left in the third quarter, has a left calf strain. ESPN's Tim McMahon reconfirming that yesterday with his report that the MRI confirms that there is no timetable as of right now as far as Luka Doncic's return.
The MRI confirmed he wasn't faking it, right?
Exactly.
That was kind of all we learned yesterday.
Yeah, the calf injury was real. It was confirmed that it was real. It was. In fact, someone actually apparently spotted him and Casey Smith walking into a hospital, and they showed the boots, that Luka Doncic was wearing. So Mavs Twitter and their investigative skills are on point because they are clearly trying to find out as much as they can before Saturday's game. If you had to say right now, based on what information we know, do you think that he plays game 1 or 2 going into this series against Utah starting on Saturday afternoon?
Just from everything that I've read, we had Brian Suterer, he's an actual sports medicine doctor on our podcast last night. And from talking to him on the show and then off air, I'm thinking he's going to miss game 1 at least miss game 1, which is a total bummer for everybody involved. But it's hard for me to imagine. Calf injuries are so tricky. They're so weird that, we have no clue. My first question to Brian last night was, how vague is the term calf injury? And he just went into this long answer about how different calf injuries can be and how, it could keep you out for months. It could keep you out for days. And it just depends on how severe it is and all that kind of stuff. And the way an athlete feels after they, have a calf, strain, which is literally like the fibers in your muscle, tearing a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so you start thinking about it that way and you're like, oh man, we don't want this to get any worse. And so I'd imagine he misses game 1. Probably good for game 2. The Mavs did get a terrible draw, not just for you and your personal schedule, but for Luka and his recovery schedule. Getting 5 days off is nice, but having that early Saturday game and then, the difference between that early Saturday game and that in a late Sunday game would be incredible, right? That's another almost 2 days that he could have had
for recovery. Yeah.
For recovery. So that was not in the Mavs' favor, but yeah, here we are. I'm guessing. I'm assuming he's going to miss at least a game, and some of it's for my sanity, and some of it's just because of the way that it looks right now.
It's funny. I've learned more about the various parts of a calf muscle over the last 48 hours than I care to actually know, because I was diving into videos. There's 3 different parts of the calf. There's muscle fiber tearing. It's just so much that I did not necessarily want to have to learn due to obviously what's going on here. But if I had to say myself, I would agree with you that game 1 seems to be a real stretch as far as him actually playing. And it was funny because, I was going, someone had commented on Twitter about the idea, well, look, the urgency of him playing is serious. He needs to play. And I said, what you can't do is get into a situation where the only superstar in recent memory that I can remember that was rushed back, and he even had 36 days, I believe, between the calf injury and the time that he returned, and it still felt like it was rushed, was Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
And we know what happened with Kevin Durant when he came back, and that was with well over 3-4 weeks of rest. I'm going to be, and look, this may be getting me in trouble with Mavs fans, but hey, it is what it is. If it means that this dude has to miss this series, and let's say that they don't necessarily win the series, but you can at least ensure that going forward, there's not going to be any repercussions in trying to rush him back, I'm for sitting him, because what I don't want to see this team happen to this team is they rush him back in order to try and win a first round series. And then something even worse happens when you know that the future, the next 10 years of this guy's career and this franchise hinges on what he's able to be, available. So I know Mavs fans won't necessarily like that. Trust me, I want him to play. I would love for him to be out there on the floor.
Yeah.
But you got to err on the side of caution, I would think, if you're the Mavericks, right, in this case, given how important he obviously is to this franchise.
Yeah, I asked Brian last night, too, about Kevin Durant specifically, and he just said the diagnosis on Kevin Durant must have been either so bad or Kevin Durant lied so so efficiently that he went back in there. He said that he's never ever in all of his working with athletes and everything has ever warned somebody that had a calf injury, hey, don't go too hard because this could turn into an Achilles rupture, right? He's never really had anything like that. And so I think that may be some kind of an anomaly. So that quelled my worry about the Achilles and all that kind of stuff a little bit, which was nice. But yeah, I'm with you. You definitely don't want a worse calf strain, right? That could definitely happen for sure. And so, yeah, you don't want to rush him back in that way. And yeah, it's sort of where we are right now. But he's only 20. He's only 23, right?
Correct,
he's only 23.
Exactly.
And
yes, exactly.
Isaac asked this question last night. It's would you give up your pinky to have Luka be 100% healthy for this, playoff run? And I was thinking about it. And I was well, they're not built to win the title this year, right? If they were built to win the title, if it was the Suns and Chris Paul got hurt and I could give up,
or Devin Booker,
or Devin Booker, and I was a huge Suns fan, and I was maybe I would do that. But for this team, for right now, how important is it for them to win a first round series? Is it life and death? Is it missing a pinky or not? I don't think so. And so if you think about it that way, where you're actually giving up something, you're actually risking something, semi in the way that Luka is risking something in this one, you think about it a little differently.
It's funny you mentioned the importance of winning the series because, I've said recently that I think, especially prior to his injury, that this was the most important first round series for this Mavs team in quite some time. Not just because obviously they haven't won a series since, 2011, but this was, I thought, the team that if they won a first round series and moved on to at least a second round and beyond, this was the team that you look at if you're a free agent or if you're someone down the road or a superstar or whomever. You finally look at this Mavericks team and says, oh, that dude, number 77, with that team was able to win a playoff series. Maybe I might be the guy that might be the missing piece to want to come to Dallas. I think that's why I assigned so much importance to this and why I wanted them to have home court advantage, because I wanted them to have the best opportunity to win a first round series so that they can finally put themselves in that serious conversation about teams going into the future that you can look at as real championship contenders for the next 3, 4, 5 years that could possibly attract the kind of star piece to go alongside Luka Doncic going forward that can make them a true, contender that you could see winning a championship in the next 2 to 3 years. That's why I assigned that much importance to it. Am I wrong in thinking that way? Or is it saying, hey, look, just get a first round series win and then let's see what happens from there at that point?
Yeah, I mean, that could be one of the reasons why it's important. It could signal to other stars for sure. I think the Mavs have signaled to other stars with the hiring of Jason Kidd and Nico Harrison, right? They've definitely signaled in that way for sure. And if players if players don't see how good Luka is right now and don't believe that he can win a series and get them to that next level, then I don't know. Maybe we don't want them. Right?
But he has to show that, right? He has to show that he can win a first round. I mean, he's only 23, so he's got obviously plenty of time. But the way that he's performed as an All NBA performer, given what they're trying to do, I think he accelerated their timeline so much that the sense of urgency to try and win a first round series, I think, is now there for them to do so, given what he's been able to do as a player so far.
For sure. And this summer they have a couple picks they can use. They have definitely contracts that they can cobble together. It's actually the reason why Nico Harrison said that he did the Porzingis deal was to get more flexible with contracts. And so like they can make one of those big trades if somebody does want to come to Dallas, if they hear from somebody in back channels that no one would admit to, that they hear that somebody wants to come to Dallas. And so yeah, like that's a good point that this could be a really important series because of signaling to other stars across the league that, hey, we're here and we're for real, and Luka is somebody that can get you to that next level.
So speaking of that series, they're taking on a Utah Jazz team that has been dealing with turmoil of their own, questions on whether or not a guy like Quinn Snyder comes back as their next head coach. The Lakers need a new head coach. We'll see what happens there. But obviously more so with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell and the amount of tension that still seems to be within that organization, the way that they played down the stretch. While as talented as they are with Gobert and Mitchell and Clarkson and, Bogdanovich and those players, this feels a lot different than what we've seen from the Utah Jazz over the last several years. Even though they're still a really good team, it just feels like coming into the series, there's something amiss about what they've got going on. And it may not just be on the floor, but just organizationally, given how many tries they've had at it and still not have been successful the way that they should have been.
This is what happens when you add Dwayne Wade to your front office and your ownership group, right? Like Dwayne Wade comes and all of a sudden you're just No, I think that you look at this Jazz team and you say, okay, well, they're kind of just the same team that they've been, but they seem to be missing something. And you start looking through and you're like, okay, is it just Joe Ingles? Like literally that's the guy, that made such a big difference. Georges Niang is a guy that's missing. Maybe that's a guy, but that's kind of the only guys that they're missing. And maybe Ingles was bigger for their culture and for their toughness and for their, obviously, defensive, like perimeter defense than we realize, because that seems to be the only difference. Maybe there's some internal strife and bickering and things like that happen with this Jazz team. The rest of the league doesn't like Rudy Gobert. Maybe the rest of his team doesn't like Rudy Gobert necessarily. And so you start looking through that and you start seeing how they play. And it just comes down to like clutch time in the fourth quarter. They've just been melting down in some of these fourth quarters. And you're just wondering, what is going on with this team? They have the best offense in the NBA, which is insane to think about. And then when Rudy Gobert plays, they're a really, really good, like top 10 defense when he's on the court. And so, and literally just from him, like it's just him.
It's just him, right?
It's anchoring that defense, and he's been incredible this year. And so, like, this is still a really, really good team. They do have their flaws. They can break down. They have seen that small ball look a ton this year. The teams have just been throwing it at them, and I'm not sure that they've really solved it, even though they've seen it a lot. But yeah, this team is weird, and you start looking at, okay, are they just breaking down because they're done playing together, or was Joe Ingles really that important? Because that's really the only piece that has changed.
It's interesting watching this team and the way that they've collapsed in fourth quarters, blowing multiple, 20-point leads. And this is a team that just seems like there's a lot of dysfunction there that can't be explained. And maybe it's a situation where this is it for them. Like, this is it for this group, whether Gobert is there next year or Donovan Mitchell is there next year, or one of those two guys are gone. It feels like that this is kind of the end of the line for this team. It reminds me a lot of when the Clippers reached a certain point with Lob City, with Blake Griffin and Chris Paul and those guys. They got to a certain point, but then you realize that this team was probably not going to be the team that eventually broke through and won a championship or got to a Western Conference final. That's what it feels a lot like with this team, is that they've reached a certain ceiling. And if they get bounced in the first round, especially with a shorthanded Mavericks team, if Luka isn't able to go in multiple games, I could see how this Utah team is kind of broken up at this point, because now you're seeing regression, not necessarily the progression that you would think with guys like Gobert and Mitchell on this team going forward. So when you look at the Mavericks and how they match up against Utah, this is a team, two teams that neither one of them won a road game in the 4 games that they played against each other. The Utah Jazz won both their games on their home floor. Then the Mavericks won the final 2 games of this season series on their home floor, which is why it's really nice that the Dallas Mavericks have home court advantage in the first round of this series. But how do you think this Mavericks team matches up with Utah, given what both teams have at this point?
Yeah, you talked about the breaking down of this Jazz team. Like, this Jazz team hasn't made it past the second round, right? Talk about the Mavs and not being able to make it past the first round. Since 2017, they've conference semis, first round, conference semi, right? Like they've made it second round 3 times and only out of the first round, and only in the first round twice. Like that to me seems like a team that hit its wall, right? And so if that happens again to them this year, they don't even make it to the conference finals again. When last year last year should have been their year to make it out of there. They just haven't made it, and it seems like they've hit their wall, and so that's probably why they're going to be breaking up. But the way that they match up, it's so hard to do a preview not knowing what we're going to get from Luka. But let's say Luka plays, right? Let's say Luka plays at least 6 games or at least past game 1. He is the mismatch. Like he is the guy that changes everything for the Mavs. He's the guy that can get past their perimeter defenders. He's the guy that can make life tough for Rudy Gobert, make him move around, and cause him to come out on the perimeter. And then all of a sudden there's backdoor cuts available all over the place because nobody else can defend the rim or stay in front of their guy. And so Luka is the guy that just makes everything work against this Jazz team. Makes him work a ton. I think he would average if he was right and healthy, I mean, he could average 35, 40 points a game in this series because the Jazz are going to give it to him, right? They're going to give him those floaters. They're going to give him the step back threes. They're going to give him that. And if he gets hot in a series, he could put up some incredible numbers in this series and some incredible assist numbers too if the Mavs are hitting their threes. This Jazz team is also a team that slows it down. They're really slow with their pace as well. Like their pace is pretty close to where the Mavs are. So this series, the playoffs already slow down, and these teams already play at a playoff pace. So I don't know if it gets even slower. So we'll just see no transit. We'll see one transition dunk and it'll blow us away because of how slow these teams play. But they rely on their offense and their ball movement, and in the fourth quarters when their ball movement gets stalled, then that's when they really kind of break down and just rely on these ISO scorers. And the Mavs are going to have to rely on Dorian and Reggie Bullock and probably a little bit of Josh Green to try and hold Donovan Mitchell to not just kill him in the fourth quarter.
It's going to be fun to watch this series, especially as we mentioned, if Luka is able to be at pretty much full strength in this series, because these two teams played each other very close during the regular season. But when you start thinking about what these fourth quarters could look like and the kind of playmaking from Luka Doncic, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jalen Brunson, it was funny because Kurt Goldsberry put out the scoring, the scoring chart, or basically the zones on where the best scorers were in the NBA. Jalen Brunson was dynamic in the paint. In fact, I think it was on the left side closest to the basket. Jalen Brunson was the leading zone scorer in terms of that portion of the floor. His ability to finish at the rim, I think, has gone completely underrated this year. So I wonder how teams like Utah will look at Luka in terms of defending him, because you've seen it a lot this season. Teams are blitzing Luka, sending 2 and 3 guys at him, trying to get the ball out of his hands, forcing other guys to either make shots or to be ball handlers and creators, which makes Spencer Dinwiddie and Jalen Brunson that much more valuable given how much they'll see the ball in their hands, especially if Utah decides to not just necessarily send, a guy like Royce O'Neal at him, but if they decide to send multiple guys at him, other guys are going to have plenty of opportunities with the basketball in their hands to make plays. And if this team, and I think we've talked about this too, if they make shots, this team is extremely hard to beat. When they don't, this is ugly to watch them when they shoot the basketball because it's not pretty when shots aren't going down. You can say that for most teams in the league, but for some reason with the Mavericks, it feels like that much more is the case with them, that when they're hitting shots, they're really good. When they're not good at all when it comes to their play offensively.
Their three-point shooting opens up so much, right? It opens up the paint. It opens up the driving lanes for players. It just opens up so much for them because it's Luka and some shooters, right?
Exactly.
It's Luka and some shooters, and then you have Dinwiddie and Brunson that can get their own shot. Yeah, I just checked Kurt Goldsberry's little graph, and Brunson if you're facing the basket on the left side of the basket, right next to it, on the left block, basically.
Yeah,
just killing it from that area. This whole chart is interesting. There's some weird players on here. Fournier's on here twice.
Yeah, PJ Tucker is the leading corner.
Oh, the corner,
on the right side.
He took Dorian's spot over there.
Exactly. If you look at the 3-point line, all you see from the most part is Curry's face, basically going around the arc. Luka has the little portion, on the right hand side, with his 3-pointer there. But
he was working on that right step back this year.
Yeah, he was. We know he loves his step back 3-pointers, says Luka Doncic. I just hope one day he hits a catch and shoot 3 and just blows everybody's mind with the catch.
I know.
That would be amazing.
That's what's missing. But
it is what's missing from it seems like his game at this point.
It goes back to them hitting their threes, and it kind of is like when Luka hits those step back threes, like it just ignites this team in a way that not many other players when they're hitting shots does. Like it just gives them so much confidence that, oh my God, that guy is doing stuff that we don't see other players in the league do, and it just makes us invincible if he's hitting his step back three. If he doesn't, then it could be a short clock for them on offense, and then they have to run back down on defense and try really hard again, right? And then and like put in all this effort and do that. And so it was one of the reasons why Jason Kidd kept saying throughout the year, we can't be a team that misses our threes and hangs our head on the other end and just goes, woe is me, and can't play defense, because this defense requires a lot of effort. You have to be flying around. You have to be locked in and knowing when your player is possibly going to try and score, knowing when they're possibly going to, cut, knowing when you're going to have to rotate quick because somebody else like risks something on their assignment or try to go for a steal or something like that. And it all comes back to effort, which is why I'm excited to see this defense in the playoffs, because there's all you do is give effort in the playoffs, right? You're locked in every single moment. And so I think that they have an opportunity to really show something in these playoffs, especially on the defensive end.
Yeah, Dorian Finney-Smith is my guy that I'm going to be watching, especially in this series. He's been so good during the second half of the year. Once he got his contract, it felt like the weight and the burden was kind of eased off of him, and he's been playing like a guy who's just out there just playing ball ever since. And I think it's been fun to watch him, how he defends guys like Clarkson and Mitchell. We know he can guard multiple positions on the floor. It's going to be fun to watch. Bullock the same way, guarding multiple positions on the perimeter. That's going to be fun to watch. And you talked about the scrambling in terms of the defense that they do. A lot of communication, a lot of over communication that they have to do to get out on guys like Clarkson and Mitchell and other guys that can create not only for themselves, but also can shoot, the 3-pointers. So that defense is going to be put to the test. But more importantly, if 77 is on the floor, that changes the entire complexion of the series when we look at the Mavericks, and the Jazz. Before we get you out of here, though, obviously a lot to still be decided as the week goes on. What is your confidence meter right now when it comes to Luka Doncic either playing or not playing, and how that affects what this team will look like? What's your confidence meter if he plays, and your confidence meter if he doesn't play multiple games in this series?
I'm 100% confident that he will play at some point in this series. I just don't know if it's game one. If he does play, let's say he's only held out of game one, I'm still pretty confident in this Mavs team. I think they can figure out this Jazz, even though they'll lose home court advantage if he misses game one. Then all of a sudden, then it's just 3 games left for each on each home court. But I'm still confident this Mavs team can steal one in Utah and figure out a way to do that, especially if they're hitting threes, if they're, if Dinwiddie and Brunson with a shortened rotation too. We've seen the Mavs kind of get killed in some of those lineups when Luka's not on the floor at times, which was the biggest weakness of the Mavs last year, but they've shored that up a little bit this year. They've shored that up with Brunson and Dinwiddie, and if they can cover up those and if they can hit threes, then this team, like we said, can beat anybody. And so I'm still confident that they could. I don't know if I'll put a percentage on it. 75% confident that they can still win, even if. And this is assuming Luka's going to miss game one. But yeah, that's probably, if he doesn't play, my confidence that they could win is just maybe one game. Maybe they steal one game, and that's kind of it.
Last thing I'll say is, Maxi Kleber, where you at, my guy? We got to have you. We got to figure this thing out going into the playoffs. As long he's got to do the little things. I know necessarily in between the ears, shot wise, right now it's not necessarily working, but he still can affect the game in a lot of ways when it comes to his defense, his rebounding, his ability to switch and play multiple positions in terms of his defense. He's got to be there and be there in full capacity for this Mavericks team to, I think, have that much better of a shot. And hopefully as the series or as the rest of the playoffs goes on, he finds some semblance of a jump shot, because that has just gone away for him. And I thought it was going to come back at some point. It just hasn't necessarily come back at this point, which is concerning, but there's still other ways that he can affect the floor with what he actually does for the Mavericks.
It's a little bit of a litmus test. If you watch Maxi and if you see the way people comment about him, like, oh, take that guy out. He's done. Get him out. He's just hurting them. Like, okay, he does so much other stuff, right? Like he does so many other things. He moves the ball. He'll set screens. Obviously on the defensive end, he still can be impactful. And yeah, kind of the only thing he does on offense that is tangible is hit threes, right? Like that's kind of the only thing he does. And so, yeah, that does stand out a ton. It would be great if he did. He's hit a couple of them here recently. Like we've seen a couple games where he hits 2 threes in a game, which is exciting. And it's better than, missing everything in games. But yeah, part of the Mavs 3-point shooting is if Maxi and Dorian and Bullock and these catch and shoot guys, if they can hit threes, then it's just different. It's just different for this team to be able to, to beat somebody, especially like Utah when they're going to try to play smaller. Maxi is part of that smaller unit, even though he is a big. They're going to play him and have him spread the floor out. I was watching a couple of those Utah games last night, and Maxi spaces the floor, and he's going to get a ton of open threes with Rudy Gobert there. They're going to have a scouting report on him that says, he's been in this terrible funk over this last stretch here, and you can leave him open because he's not going to hit enough to make it worth our while to go out there and send Rudy Gobert all the way to the 3-point line to guard him.
That's going to be a fun matchup to watch. Hopefully, as the rest of this week goes on, we'll get some good news, some better news when it comes to Luka Doncic and their chances, obviously, of having him play for the rest of the series. Nick, give everybody a preview of what you've got going this week as we get ready for the Mavericks taking on the Jazz, and what's going on with Locked On Mavericks as you guys get ready for the playoffs this week.
Locked On Mavs every day on YouTube, podcast, wherever you get it. We'll have a series preview. We're doing a crossover with David Locke, the radio voice of the Utah Jazz and host of Locked On Jazz and my boss. we're doing a crossover with him tonight, so that should be a good episode. A lot of good stuff.
Looking forward to it, man. Well, you can find Nick on Twitter at Nick Van Exit, one of the co-hosts, of course, of the Locked On Mavericks podcast. Find him everywhere on social media, on Twitter, especially on YouTube. Obviously, all the things that they've been doing covering this team. Nick's got a lot of fans. People keep walking up to him at games and whatnot. Hey, Nick, love the podcast. Love the pod, man. Love everything that you got going on, man. And while I'm sitting there just watching him, just taking all of his fans and whatnot. Yeah, that's.
Should we tell him about the guy from last game?
The guy that walked up to you was like,
guy comes up to me. He's like, hey, man, love the show. And then his girlfriend or his girl is like, hey, let's take a picture. I'm like, okay, sure. So I take a picture with him. And he comes up to you and he's like, hey, man, love the show. And then he leaves.
Exactly. Yeah.
Didn't want a picture with Kevin. I don't know what's wrong with
not
that
at all. Nope, not at all. Nope. They love Nick. And
he made a mistake there.
No, he got it right because I don't know, man. They love Nick Angstadt. Nick, as always, my man, appreciate the time and looking forward to you guys' coverage this week on Locked On Mavericks. Again, you can find Nick on Twitter at Nick Van Exit. This has been another episode of Inside the Mavs right here on Kevin Gray Sports. Again, you can find me on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports, and of course right here on YouTube at Kevin Gray Sports. We'll have another episode coming up here in the next couple of days as we continue to get you ready for the Mavericks taking on Utah Jazz in the first round of the playoffs. Nick, appreciate the time, man. We'll talk to you later.
Always.
Appreciate it.